So let me give you the background. In 2001, the government of Uganda issued what they call request for proposal, something, request for proposal. Something to that effect,
RFPs.
RFPs. But it invited private companies to come and express interest in taking a concession for the distribution of electricity in Uganda. 6 companies responded. One was from the United States, one was from Britain, one was from France, 2 were from Spain, and 1 was from South Africa. So those companies that expressed interest were invited to come and do a due diligence on Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited, because they had unbundled UEB into 3 parts. 6 companies came here and did a due diligence. All of them, without exception, went away. Only one company, which was a government parastatal owned by the British government, called CDC, Commonwealth Development Corporation, wrote a letter to the government of Uganda saying, we have come, we have done a due diligence, and we will not be able to participate in taking this concession for the following reasons. I'll give a few for purposes of brevity. One, you have UEDCL that is managing this concession. You have had your distribution network there's been no investment in your distribution network for 30 years, so it's moribund. That leads to high technical losses. Your electricity tariff has been the same for almost 10 years in spite of domestic inflation and foreign exchange depreciation. You have set up a regulator whom you say is independent. When the regulator intervened by increasing the price, people demonstrated on the streets, government responded by reversing the decision of the regulator, showing that the regulator is not independent to make decisions. You have one of the biggest problems is the government itself has been consuming electricity and not paying. That is why UEB and successor UEDCL have serious financial constraints. And if you increase the tariff rapidly, it tends to cause thefts. And these thefts would require a private company to invest a lot of money in security, which it cannot do. So in view of these problems, we will not invest. So Sendaola, who was the Minister of Finance at the time, Keith Muhakanizi, who was Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, and Chris Kasami, who was PSST at Ministry of Finance, went to see the President as an emergency. The government of Uganda was broke, and reported to the President that everyone who came here has walked away from us without the courtesy of explaining why they are not interested. Only one person, who is a government parastatal of Britain, has done so. And I think it was, at that time it was because Claire Short was close to President Yoweri Museveni personally. She was the Minister for International Development, and the government of Tony Blair was pumping a lot of money into Uganda because Blair was obsessed with foreign aid and supporting African countries to get both debt relief and foreign aid. President Museveni, as an emergency, put Sendaola is still alive. I am very happy about this. General Sendaola, if you are watching this show, I beg you, these people should allow you to call in and you explain. President Museveni put them, if I'm not mistaken, actually in his presidential jet. This is how urgent it was. They are flown to London to tell these people, please, how can you help us restructure this business? So CDC came here and said 2 things. One, we don't want to do it alone. We will need a partner in order to spread the risk. So they invited another government parastatal from South Africa called ESCOM. They formed a joint venture called Umeme in order to reduce the risk. 2, they said, we are going to do a pilot for just 2 years. We will come and for 2 years invest, I think, $5 million, non-refundable. We work with you. We see how you respond to a private company running your distribution system. The lessons we learn will allow us to negotiate with you a concession. So the government agreed. So they came here. Now, I need to give you a context. At the time, I think UEDCL is advertised for this concession, the technical and commercial losses are 28%. But because of the uncertainty created by the fact that you are changing ownership, people in UEDCL do not know whether I still have my job or I don't. What happens in such a context? You suffer from asset stripping. Now, asset stripping has two aspects. There is the physical aspect. The physical aspect that workers in an organization can systematically steal assets of the company because they don't see a future in it. But that's a small aspect of asset stripping. The bigger problem is workers, unsure of their job tomorrow, can withhold their effort, their work effort. So if you're supposed to collect bills, you don't collect. If you're supposed to fix a line, you don't fix. By the way, right now, Umeme is being asset stripped. Any one of you who lives in Kololo or anywhere in Uganda right now, there is a massive electricity cuts.
Yes.
Because lines that are getting old are not being repaired. Umeme has no promise that it knows it doesn't have a concession in future. There is no need to invest in the line. So if your transformer gets off, it's not replaced. If your wires break, Umeme will drag its feet. Every single thing right now is a mess at Umeme because of asset stripping. So by the time these guys of Umeme take over, these commercial and technical losses have now escalated to around about 40%. It is at that 40% that actually the government of Uganda negotiates a concession. Now, the concession was written in that context. It has many provisions. If you read them blindly, you say, oh, government of Uganda negotiated a bad contract. A contract is determined by the circumstances in which it is negotiated. I'll give you an example, and this debate, I have had it with many people in the government. If you go and buy a government treasury bond in Uganda of 10 years, right now they're giving you an interest of 17.9%. Yeah. If you go to buy a government bond for Germany, the Germans, you buy it at 0.5%. Now, inflation rate in Germany has been 2.7. In Uganda has been 2.5. Is Uganda government being cheated because people are buying its treasury bond at 17, its 10-year bond at 17.9? I want to ask you, are we being cheated? Our inflation is very low. If you look at the price of the dollar in Uganda, it has not changed between 2017 and now. In 2017, June, the dollar was 3,680. Go to URA records. Today, it is the same price. It has fluctuated in between, but over a period of 8 years or 7 years, the dollar price over 8 years has remained fairly the same today and 7 years ago. So why is Uganda having to borrow at very high rates? Because of the risk is considered. So there are many criticisms a person can make of the Umeme concession if you don't understand that the government of Uganda was such a high risk event. I'll give you an example. At that time, government was the biggest debtor. Am I correct? Yes. It owed UEDCL a lot of money. It was not paying. State House could not pay. Defense was not paying. So in that agreement, they said World Bank offered to put $320 million in a bank account on an escrow, so that if government of Uganda does not pay Umeme, Umeme would get money from the escrow and pay for it, pay itself. People were so angry about that concession. So the concession was written to say, you government behave better. My grandson here, Paul, is taking over. Paul, you watch. The day you take over, these guys will not pay you. So what Umeme has been doing is, remember, government buys electricity using Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited, ETCL. It bulk purchases from all these independent power producers, including the government, including the EGCL, right? It sells it to Umeme. Umeme sells it to me and you and collects from us. When it collects from us, it is supposed to pay you ETCL. But many times government departments don't pay. If they don't pay, Umeme confiscates the money supposed to collect. The money is supposed to transmit to ETCL. It doesn't. It withholds it. He will have to do it, or else that thing will collapse. So Umeme found collection rates were about 70%. It has increased now collection rates of Umeme are about 120% because of these Yaka meters. Remember that if you buy electricity on Yaka, you have really lent money to Umeme. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. It is only when you on the P&L, it is entered as on the balance sheet as a liability. So they don't enter it as revenue. It is only when you consume that unit that is recognized as revenue. So they collect a lot of money up front. So Umeme was able to invest in the network, and in 2012, Umeme decided to go on the international market, on the stock exchange. They call it IPO, initial public offering, to sell shares in the company to the international community. What happened, Timothy? Because in 2001, I told you, not a single person was interested in buying. We had to fly people on the presidential jet to beg investors. In 2011, 2012, whenever they launched the IPO, Umeme shares were oversubscribed by 157%. 157%. It means for every 100 shares available, people are willing to buy 157 shares. So Umeme had been so successful in transforming a moribund electricity distribution system into a highly attractive investment for international investors. When they did the SPO, the secondary public offering, among the companies that bidded to buy shares in Umeme, because some investors were exiting, about 5 firms with total investment funds at their disposal of $1.5 trillion were bidding to buy shares in Umeme. So I can tell you what Umeme succeeded in doing is transform an electricity distribution sector that was unattractive to any investor, domestic or international, to turn it into the most attractive investment vehicle in the whole of Uganda. So for me, I am very satisfied that Umeme was a golden chance. Now, government of Uganda started saying
Andrew, you're saying Umeme is a golden goose laying golden eggs.
Yes.
For us.
Yes.
But also in your submission, the concession is questionable because we really had no leverage on negotiating here.
Actually, I should tell you this. We started leveraging the concession because it was from 2003, I think 2010, or 2011, from 2004 to 2011, 7 years. Then they did 2011 to 2018, then 2018, I think, to 2025, something like that.
Yes.
Now, in the current negotiations, Umeme had negotiations with the president personally. The president said, Umeme said, we want to reduce the return on investment from 20% to 14%. The president said, I want 10. Umeme accepted the 10%. But in spite of accepting it, the president insisted that Umeme should exit. Okay, fine. Here was my view. If you want Umeme to exit, in other words, you're interested in the foreign investors, you can have Ugandans invest in it. We have NSSF. NSSF collects about 185 billion every single month. It has enough funds to buy the whole. Remember, by the way, right now, yes, right now, Umeme is owned 56% by East Africans. The international investors are only 44% because Ugandans own 36%. East African shareholders own another 12%, which makes it 56%. No, 20% is owned by East Africans, 36% by Ugandans, of which 23% is owned by Umeme. Now, if you ask me, rather is owned by NSSF. If you asked me to structure Umeme, I would not disband it. I would keep Umeme and increase the shareholding of NSSF because NSSF has the money to buy it. It has actually the cash to buy all the rest.
Yes.
And I would sell it to NSSF on one condition, that Umeme be liberated from being subject to rules of procurement of PPDA. I'll come back again to Paul and tell him what challenges he's going to face. Paul, I'm going to be a prophet of doom. Because once, so that it can exist as a serious business without subject to government rules and government contestations over procurement.
Okay.
Hold a second, let me finish for you. So if NSSF buys all the shares of Umeme and maybe owns now it would move from 21%, maybe it would own 80%. If that happened, really how much rate of return we pay to Umeme becomes irrelevant. Do you know why? Who owns NSSF? Me, you, and all Ugandans. So if government of Uganda is paying a very high return to its citizens, what is wrong with that? Okay. You see, if you look at a ledger, I want you to understand this.
Yes.
You should understand this. For me, I believe that one of the problems Uganda has, if you have a foreign company called MTN, it has a rate of return of 50% on investment. Then they make profits and ship them over to South Africa. You have Stanbic Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, Absa Bank, all these big corporations that are owned by foreigners, making huge returns and shipping them abroad. That's a disaster for you. But if you have your own citizens owning these businesses and the government, they're always making these huge returns and reinvesting in the country, there is no net loss. So what would be a loss to you, the consumer, would a benefit as a consumer of Umeme, it will also be a benefit to you when NSF is paying you your interest at the end of the day. I think Umeme was very good. It transformed the electricity distribution market, made it attractive for lenders and private investors. And as Paul from UEDCL, Paul Mwesigo has told us, even them as UEDCL now, they can, if they want to borrow, every lender is lining up. The Uganda electricity distribution, the effectiveness of Umeme was that, in fact, for us to develop Karuma and Isimba, required to have an effective distribution system to collect the money. So he's saying they have 100% collection rates. So if I am trying to invest in the upstream, which is generation, because he is downstream, he's able to collect the money, it makes sense for me. If the downstream are not collecting the money, it means me at upstream, my investment will be in trouble. So Umeme was very good for Uganda. Now, I should tell you that theoretically, I believe government of Uganda and the citizens of Uganda should own this economy. So ideally, I would not want foreign investors, as I have always argued, everybody who has read, I have always said Umeme should have been owned by NSSF. NSF is owned by Ugandans who subscribe to it, and therefore every return comes to Uganda. Now, I have listened to Paul Mwesugwa very well. I am really impressed by what you're saying. I am happy for you. But for me, I will tell you the following things. As warning shots, it is very likely that my predictions are going to be wrong. And I pray that my predictions are wrong, because future generations of Ugandans will be happy that I was wrong. But I speak from my knowledge of Uganda, of Ugandan politics. So right now, Umeme, you say, has revenues of 2.2 trillion. You have revenues of 100 billion. So tomorrow, all of a sudden, you will move from 100 billion to 2.3 trillion worth of revenue. These politicians, Omaras in parliament there, will begin looking at you. The wheeler dealers at State House who surround State House like vultures on a cattle or an animal carcass will be looking at it. So here are the risks you face, and perhaps I pray you find the wisdom to manage them. The biggest risk will be political buccaneering. People will want to get a piece of the Umeme pie. If your revenues are 2.3 trillion, let me assume 25% of that are your labor costs, your staff costs. So you'll have about 1.7 trillion shillings where you are actually procuring things for investment, or maybe 1.5 trillion. I do not know how much money will go into, how many are operating expenses. So if you go into heavy investment and you're going to do $200, $300 million worth of investment per year, the people who want contracts will go and badmouth you at State House, where you have no voice, unless you have a direct link to the president or to one of his sons-in-law or children or things like that. This is the disaster of Uganda. They will badmouth you where you don't have a defense. He will send his intelligence operatives to investigate who of the lowest intellectual quality, and they will report him wrong things. So you'll find a right man like you trying to do proper governance. The president has actually a different impression, and he will kick you out of that company. These people will send you to jail. I've seen people here in Uganda go to jail when they were trying to do the right thing. So that is one political risk. Me, I want you to look at. So that company, because it all of a sudden becomes very big, may attract wheeler dealers, conmen, and so many other people who have better access to the key decision makers at State House. Who, because I should tell you this, Paul, at the risk of sounding vain, I have fought and defended particular public officials in Uganda who run organizations of that size before the president, and some of them to restore them in their jobs when they're being fought and they don't have the other voice and the president has wrong information. He really is convinced, he can be angry with you, convinced about something wrong, because also when you're president, you're dealing with so many issues, but so you have to you deal with people you trust. So these guys will come when you issue a contract for transformers worth $50 million or for electricity poles or whatever it is. People will bid. Many of them are connected to the first family. They are connected to State House. They will want their companies, even when they are not efficient or cost effective, to be the suppliers. But they're the ones who have the ear of the president. And I always tell my friends, me, I'm not a church person. So you will have to make political judgments. How do I build relationships with powerful, influential people in the system to ensure my protection? Then we come to these parliamentarians. They can take you on because you are now subject to them as a government company. You go there to approve your budget or whatever it is. You go there. You have not sent bribes to these parliamentary committees in advance. And they will eat off your ears and they will make the public think that you are the most evil person. You leave those. Then you do a procurement. Some person loses. They'll go to PPDA. Others will go to IGG. Others will go to parliament, others will go to the press. All of a sudden you find yourself a subject of disastrous, ill-informed, stupid political buccaneering. So I pray God help our country that this man and the Umeme he's taking over UEDC are protected. Because it is not the good things you do. It is how you navigate the very treacherous political terrain to ensure that you protect the institutional integrity of UEDCL. And sometimes you may find that here you have to bribe a person wrongly so that they don't give you headache. Here you will have to buy off this one. You may give your contract to a particular company, not because it's the best deserving, but it may protect you politically, things like that. You have to balance the technical considerations of the organization against the political reality of Uganda. If you are able to balance those two, I can tell you be a successful person. If you say I'm going to do the right governance structure, the right thing, my friend, sometimes doing the right thing is not the right thing to do. I mean, you may need to find what is the politically correct thing to do, but which is also not technically damaging to the degree that the company is compromised.